Thanks for watching WRAL. I'm Megan Cloherty, and I sat down with all of the candidates who are running for Wake County District Attorney to ask them how they'll approach the job. I asked them all pretty much the same questions, and we edited it and put it on the news, but we wanted to give you all a space where you could see the raw, unedited interviews of each candidate. If you like content like this, like and subscribe. Tell me, you've served this community in many different ways. Why is this role the one you're chasing now? What will make you a good DA for Wake County?
I mean, there's so much on the line right now for our state, for our country. I'm running for Wake County District Attorney because the stakes for our community and our democracy have never been higher. This is a campaign about public safety. It's a campaign about tackling political corruption. My time in Congress was cut short because of Republican gerrymandering, and I've got a lot of work left to do.
So it's basically you want to run because you still have sort of the fight in you. Is that fair?
Absolutely. No, there's a ton that we need to do to push back and fight back against a president right now in the Oval Office who's shredding the Constitution. And the courts are a place where we do that. That's an important part of this. And what most people don't know, too, is the Wake County District Attorney is in charge of tackling political corruption for the entire state. We've had a district attorney who hasn't taken on that role. But when you look at the corruption that's splashed across your newscast, every month, there's one person that answers for that, and that's the Wake County District Attorney. In terms of investigating and prosecuting those cases of political corruption, that's an important part of this job.
It's interesting because it's a different answer than I've gotten before, right? The corruption angle. And tell me, so does that have to do with my next question was, what do you do on day one? And is that part of your plan?
No, absolutely. I think it's, we need a district attorney who's willing to tackle those tough cases. And that for me was an important part of this job, and it's a place where the Wake County District Attorney doesn't just handle the 100,000 cases a year for our state's largest county, but also is the one, because we have the capital here, that decides, what is justice? How do we tackle political corruption? And it's about time we had someone willing to do that.
You have an interesting perspective, especially because before running for Congress, for all of this stuff that you've done for us, you were a defense attorney, you still are a defense attorney. So you have not worked in the prosecutor's office as your two other challengers have. So how does that give you a leg up, if you will? Can you better see the flaws in the office and what needs to change?
For 20 years I've been an attorney. Most people know me as someone who's been in Congress, as a state senator. But for 20 years I was practicing law and fighting every day to make sure my clients are treated fairly and compassionately by the North Carolina justice system. And whatever side you're on, it's about doing right. It's about what's just, what gets justice for Wake County. And that's, I think, a role that no matter which, side you're on, that's the focus of the office. It's not throwing people behind bars. It's about doing what's right for Wake County. And that's something that I think is especially important, and the perspective I bring to the office.
Do you think it's a weakness that you don't have an inner understanding of how the office works like your challengers do?
I think what's important about this job is it's not a practicing attorney. The Wake County District Attorney doesn't go and do a one-month-long jury trial. It's 100,000 cases a year. The experience that matters is running a law firm, which I did, and running a large government office, which I did in Congress. You're there to make big decisions for the community, and that's why I'm uniquely qualified for this role, because I've done that. I've, started and managed a law firm. I've run a large government office. This is an office with close to 80, staff, and your job is to run the office.
When we just had this horrible murder of this teacher in our community, Zoe Welsh, and I think it has brought to the forefront this intersection of mental health and violence in our community. What could you do in your role as DA to reduce the clashing of those two?
We got to do a ton more to tackle mental health in North Carolina. That's a huge part of why I'm running. Folks who want to learn more, they can go to my website at wileynickel.com to see all the policy positions I put forward on this. One that I think is especially important, we've got 12 counties in North Carolina that have full-time mental health courtrooms. Wake County does not. That's something that changes on day one when I'm district attorney. We got to prioritize mental health and put the resources where they need to go to tackle these cases early on before they become some horrific murder like we've just obviously seen very recently.
And how does that work? Because I mean, that obviously gives you another tool in your tool belt, right? If you have a mental health court, but then would you work with them, or is that a separate entity?
It's just about creating the court. So it's about providing resources. It's about having specialized prosecutors and judges who understand these issues. And we've seen good success in the 12 counties that do it.
Yeah.
So that for me is a place. But the most important thing for Wake County is resources. This is the point I've been making from the beginning of my campaign. You can be, you can have the best intentions for this job, but if you don't have the prosecutors to staff the cases, you're going to be in a real bad place in Wake County. And this is an issue for me where those red lights should be going. People should be very, very concerned, because in Wake County we just have 43 prosecutors. Mecklenburg County is a larger county than Wake County. They have 94. So what that means for folks who are watching this is victims have to wait years rather than months for justice. Repeat offenders stay on the street much longer. So we got to get the resources to this office. That's my #1 priority as soon as I hit the ground and start as district attorney, is to make sure we double the size of the office so we can keep Wake County safe.
And the reason why those cases are increasing, part of the reason, is because of this population influx that we've seen, right? Especially in the Raleigh area. Tell me about that, because is it causing a little bit of a growing pain situation in your view?
It absolutely is. We have, in the last 15 years, we've grown 30% as a county, and the district attorney's office has barely grown an inch. We have just about the same amount of prosecutors we had 15 years ago. And if you even step back further in Wake County, we've had just 2 elected district attorneys over the last 40 years. Our population was close to 200, just over 200,000 when we had a different district attorney, and now we're closing in on 1.3 million people. So we need someone who's going to be able to make sure the office keeps up with the growth. And again, that's something I've been talking about since the beginning of this campaign.
As far as criticism from law enforcement, which I think happens in every district that I've ever covered in my career, because they work hard to build a case on somebody and they bring it to the DA's office, and sometimes it doesn't necessarily put through the prosecution phase. Do you have any kind of response to that? I'm sure you've heard that before.
I can tell you what I see at the Wake County Courthouse every single day. What is happening there is you have an office where you have amazing prosecutors who are working very hard, but they are stretched very thin. They have a huge caseload, and we need to make sure that we give them the space, the time, the effort, the resources they need to do their job the right way. And again, that's the thing that makes the most difference in this race. As a congressman, as a state senator, I know how to bring resources back. As a congressman, I brought millions of dollars for law enforcement back from Washington to help public safety. And as the next district attorney, I'm in a very unique position to go and get money that we need from the state, from the county, from the city, from Washington, and from private dollars. There's a lot we can do with volunteers to make the courthouse work better, to be more efficient, to modernize the courthouse. Those are the things I'm excited about.
Tell me about the cases that you think you'll prioritize.
It's very simple. We need to prioritize violent crime, property theft, gun violence. Those are the things where I see we need to move more resources toward those, and that's going to be my focus.
Okay. We're rolling through this interview because I said he'd only get 20 minutes, and he's making good use of the time. Next to Arenas Law, which changes a lot of things. It's a new law, and there's kind of we're not exactly sure how it's going to be put in place and in practice rather. Mm-hmm. But it does put the death penalty back on the table in North Carolina. Are you supporting the death penalty? I support the death penalty in the most extreme cases. I think it's been used more often than it should be in recent years. But again, with this new bill in the legislature, the way I read it, it brings back or tries to bring death by firing squad. I can repeat exactly what Governor Josh Stein has said: there will not be death by firing squad. When I'm district attorney, there certainly won't be from Josh Stein as our governor. We haven't had the death penalty here, or hasn't been acted upon in many years.
So back to 2006.
Yeah, do you think that's something that Wake County has an appetite for?
No, you can see all the cases that the current district attorney has done. That Wake County jurors have been very, very, very rare to give the death penalty. It's not something that most support for the cases that this office has brought. So I think my biggest concern really is the cost. you're talking millions of dollars for these cases, and the whole focus of my campaign is resources. We need to do a lot more to keep Wake County safe. We got to prioritize where we spend our dollars the right way. I'm not going to take it off the table, but I think it should be something that we do that will not be a priority for me, the way it is with our current district attorney, who the data I saw from the period of time that was recorded a few years ago had more capital cases than any other prosecutor in the state.
The second part of Irwini's law I wanted to ask you about is the pretrial release, changing the parameters around that and what the judge's discretion can be on those. How do you think that would affect your office as far as, do you think it'll chill it? Do you think it'll make it more difficult?
That's one I'm watching very closely, and I'm talking with a lot of the judges who are there trying to make sense of how they handle their jobs. It really ties their hands. But I think if we step back, the issue we have, is mental health, the mental health challenges we have as a state, and having these tough conditions on pretrial release, is not going to solve the problem in its own. The way we solve the problem is by putting more resources towards tackling mental health, and the legislature chose not to give any money towards that. They're happy to do these conditions of release issues, but they're not funding it, and that's what we have to do, and that's the point that I think I need to make as district attorney. If we want to keep Wake County safe, we have to invest in public safety, and we need to invest in mental health resources, and we're not doing that as a state. The legislature continues to prioritize tax cuts for corporations and the wealthy instead of investing in our state, and the mental health challenges we have should be a huge issue at the top of most people's lists.
Marijuana cases, do you think those should be prioritized, or how would you handle those in your office?
As district attorney, I would deprioritize those cases. As a state senator, I co-sponsored legislation to get medical marijuana for North Carolina. My father died of cancer when I was young, and he used marijuana illegally. Nobody should be denied access to medical marijuana that is especially helpful in those end-of-life situations. So, I'll have a new policy from the current district attorney that deprioritizes those cases. Again, so we can put those resources where they need to go, tackling violent crime, tackling property theft, and really focusing on gun violence.
I think you may have addressed this earlier, so feel free to tell me the same. But as far as how you've seen crime change from when you first started here in law to now, I mean, we've had this population boom we talked about, but do you think that there's patterns that need to be addressed as far as how the office is structured?
The thing I look at when I see, what the experience is like at the courthouse is we have a courthouse that just hasn't modernized and hasn't grown with the county. So I want to do much more to make court more efficient. I want to focus on moving cases quicker and making sure we're focused on doing the things we need to do to keep Wake County safe. So that's the way I look at the challenges we have there, and more specifically, for practitioners, civility, really important. And I think we get a lot more done when we understand that civility is important for the bar. When I started practicing, we had a more collegial relationship, and part of the reason is, the resources issue. People are just working too hard. Right. So when we fix that, we're going to be able to make court work much better, and the civility piece, I think, is a big part of that for me too.
There's no debate or anything in this case, or in this race rather. So I find it interesting to ask, if you had a question for your challengers, what you'd ask them.
No, I'm just focused on the work I did as a state senator, as a congressman, as a practicing attorney. I think voters just want to hear from folks about what they want to do to help them, and that's what we've been doing with my campaign.
I was going to tell me about the campaign and what you're hearing from folks, because a lot of people have been giving you some ideas.
Absolutely, people are ready for change. It's long past time. We had a new focus at the district attorney's office. Somebody who's willing to tackle political corruption, and there's a ton of issues that matter. One of the ones that I think is especially important for people who are watching, again, a president in the Oval Office shredding the Constitution, is these abuses from ICE around the country with these ICE raids. And I've been very outspoken about this. As district attorney, ICE will not have a free pass if they come back to Wake County. I will prosecute abuse. I will put the full weight of my office down on anybody who breaks the law, Democrat, Republican, federal agent or not. If they break the law, they're going to be held accountable. And I think that's especially important when we see an agency that isn't going and finding those offenders who committed violent crime. Only 5% of the people that ICE detained and over the last year were violent criminals. That's wrong, and that's not something that will make us safer. It's political theater, and I think we've got to call it out.
There's the pressure from the federal government. There's resources and the lack of them. There's this modernization. There's a lot on your agenda. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing criminal justice in Wake County?
It goes back to resources. 43 prosecutors in Wake County, 94 in Mecklenburg County. If we want to keep Wake County safe, we got to go get those resources, and there's a way to do it. It's more positions from the state, but it's more positions from the city of Raleigh and Wake County, the county commissioners. In Mecklenburg, I said 94, are funded. 23 of those come from the city of Raleigh and Mecklenburg County. The current district attorney has never even tried to get money from Wake County or the city of Raleigh. That's something that changes immediately after this election. We need to have those resources. 12 other counties or municipalities around the state fund their DA's office to the tune of usually 2 to 4. They're smaller counties, but we need to get that same 23, and that will make the entire justice system work much better, solves a ton of the problems that we see, and allows me to do the things I need to do to bring justice and change the way that we operate here in Wake County. This is a campaign about change versus more of the same, and I'm really excited about the opportunity.
Anything I didn't ask you that you want to add?
No, I think you got it. Glad to talk anytime. The only other thing I would just say is that early voting is underway until February 28th. Election day is March 3rd. Please get out there and make your voice heard and vote.
An incredibly important early election in this primary. Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.